Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Comedy on Power Talk, thank you so much for making us part of your day today and trying not to melt away in the desert heat here in Tucson. It's well over 100 degrees and very high humidity, and got a chance to cool down today with a cat who sort of falls in between the Graybeards and the Elders, from the Pepper Adams and the Elvin Joneses, and then sort of, falls right in between that and sort of the newer, my more millennial generation of musicians. And he's been a bit of a father figure to a lot of my peers and younger generation in terms of individual sound and being able to cut above the morass of what every other person playing his apparatus is trying to do. And that has a lot to do with the fact that he was born in a bastion of music and culture in St. Louis, and wound up later on going to Howard University when there was actually a jazz curriculum there. He continues on today in a myriad of different settings, and actually just wanted to say I'm very happy he's okay, based on a pretty scary car accident a couple days ago. Greg Osby, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
It's great to hear you, man. Hey, I just wanted to ask you about, I'm authoring memoirs of a great drummer that you might have even played with before, Keith Kilgo from the Blackbirds. And he talked about, in 65, Roberta Flack and Andrew White, those cats were going to Howard University. They were studying classical music. They weren't studying jazz. That didn't come till Bird came. Donald Byrd came. I mean, Eddie Henderson tried to study jazz, but the security guard almost shot him in the head for doing it. And I just kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about how authentic, not even the curriculum, but what was your experience like at Howard when you went there in the late 70s?
Well, when I got there, it was under the direction of Mr. Fred Irby, trumpeter, and he was the director of the jazz department. He inherited his position from Donald Byrd, who preceded him. And oddly enough, Mr. Irby was my teacher. But when I began to play, he was doing his grad studies in St. Louis.
Wow!
And so he taught me how to play clarinet. And then I saw him years later when I was in high school. He said, upon graduation, if you're still interested, I can, facilitate you a scholarship to go to Howard University. So that's how we reconnected. The program was largely a classical program. I mean, the jazz department was still in its infancy, although they had been active a few years. There wasn't a very strong faculty base. There wasn't a very strong curriculum or methodology or a pedagogy. I mean, so it was catch as catch can, and we meaning the students, we largely learned from each other, fueled each other, prodded, provoked one another, and extracted a lot of information from each other, because that was the era. This is pre-digital, pre-computer, pre-access to anything. You had to go to the library to actually physically get a book and research things. Right. You had to actually transcribe things from a cassette tape or from vinyl, scratching it up, moving the needle back. It was very, very analog. And although learning and pursuing contemporary music and improvisation wasn't discouraged, there was very little for us to hang on to. So we had to, do for self, as it's known.
Well, in some ways, maybe hindsight gives you better perspective. I'm a non-musician, but at 43 years old, I just think that where we're at today, aside from the fact that really brilliant cats can get a steady paycheck, I just don't think you can codify a street language like jazz. So in some ways, wasn't that liberating that there wasn't these curriculums that were based on this rigid concept of how jazz should be taught? I mean, I think that to me, even though it was in its infancy, that must have given you a lot of leeway to essentially know the rules and then break the rules.
I agree with you fully. Once you establish a fixed approach, to something as loose and as personal as art and expression, well, then you run the risk of you know fueling the principles of machinist artists, meaning they don't really have the raw materials and the raw talent, and
Exactly.
they're not prodigious in that respect. I mean, but they can learn the mechanics of an approach, and things for me, and in my peer group, we were very organic. We learned a lot by ear. We learned a lot by rote. We learned a lot by osmosis. We learned a lot by observation, hanging out with older cats and really using them as guideposts, for the rights and wrongs and the how-tos, as opposed to being solely reliant on grades and that kind of achievement. When that's your only when that's your only endeavor, to reach the dean, to get on the dean's list, or or something like that, or to pass a jury panel or tribunal or something like that.
Right.
With creativity is not much of a consideration.
Can you be specific about some of the games, or that might be the wrong word, but kind of the organic nature of, like, I mean, did you play on the streets? Did you play at Blues Alley? I'm trying to think about there was a period of time where Washington, D.C., it was just a hotbed of post-bop activity. I mean, there were clubs. I've interviewed Ron Holloway. I don't know if you know that cat.
Mm-hmm.
He was,
dude,
these clubs would last for a couple years. I just am curious about how much, because there wasn't a standard curriculum, like, was Osby on the bandstand like 6 nights a week when you were there? I mean, how much live opportunity did you have when you were there?
There was an array of jam sessions, all over town. Now, see, when I went there, it was 1978, and at the time, Washington D.C. was still largely 85% black. It still, heralded, the moniker Chocolate City.
Right.
So there were a lot of clubs and a lot of after-hours joints where you could go and observe and sit in. Now, mind you, I wasn't ready, and that's how you learn. You learn by trial by fire. You learn what your weaknesses are, and then you go home and hone them, and come back and give it another go. So that happened, and so I met Wallace Roney there, tenor saxophonist Gary Thomas, pianist Jerry Allen, drummer Eric Allen, bassist Clarence C. So we kind of operated as kind of a core group, because the department itself wasn't very functional or very. I don't know. They didn't really supply us with the information that we wanted. I mean,
that is so. I'm sorry to cut you off. That is just amazing to hear, because you knew this cat in St. Louis. Forgive me for forgetting his name, but they really didn't. Maybe I don't know if they even could have given you what you were looking for exactly.
I mean, there's a way. There's a way, and I think that the way is really one-on-one tutelage, apprenticeship. Just being under the wing of, a learned individual, somebody who's an established elder, or somebody who's really, who knows, the ins and outs of the idiom and the lifestyle. So I sought those kind of people out, because I had a no fear approach, and I, wasn't willing to take no for an answer. So I pursued people, actually stalked a lot of them.
Dude, you were obsessed. So just talk. Can you please talk about a Greg Osby trial by fire of being on the bandstand when you really weren't ready, but actually it was such a growth experience for you?
Well, sure. Like, of course I was all of 18 years old, arrogant, because I was kind of a hot shot in St. Louis,
sure,
playing in these funk bands, which is, leagues, less demanding, than playing, music that actually moves and progresses.
Oh my God, yeah, exactly.
And so, I got there, and it was a rude awakening. I recognized how much I didn't know, and so, I went, and sat in some of the jam sessions, and there were so many holes in my education, in my approach, in my whole perspective of how things should go and how I should fit inside it. Every moment, every night was, an institutional learning experience. I mean, I came home with my head literally bursting with things to work on, things to strive for, and things to correct. So it was a really, the scene outside the school supplied me with what I needed. So in effect, in a very, very short period of time, I advanced from mediocre to somewhat competent because I was receptive to information. I wasn't dismissive of criticism, and I just, like I said, I had a voracious appetite. It was that's all I thought about. I ate, slept,
That is
and
so great. That is just
that,
freaking great. So, I mean, was it, I mean, all the, sort of some of the original, I don't want to say original masters, but like masters of the music, they were all still alive. Were you,
yes.
were you sitting in with Joe Henderson and Dizzy and those cats, or was it because I mean collectively Roni, like your group, I'm not sure if you really would necessarily grow a lot being amongst your peers. You always grow with people that are better than you. So who were like who were some of the masters that you had a chance to sit in with, even if you wound up kind of leaving a little bit forlorn because you didn't, you got humbled?
Well, the thing is that Wallace Roney, he was my age, and he had, interestingly enough, he had a practice room that was right next door to the practice room that I shared with tenor saxophonist Gary Thomas, who also was in the same lot, that I was in. He hailed from Baltimore, and so we were listening to him practice, and he was way ahead of us. I mean, he had perfect pitch. He had a lot more experience. I mean, his father had walls and walls of vinyl, so he was spoon-fed the music. We kind of came into it afterwards, after playing in marching bands and funk bands and soul groups and blues groups. So Gary and I would play for each other. I would play piano, and he would play, and then he would do the same thing for me, vice versa. One time, Wallace heard me over there struggling. He called me over. He said, "Oz," everybody calls me Oz, and he wrote out the changes to one of the old war horses, Cherokee, and he explained to me. He said, "I hear that you have a very good ear, and I hear that you're moving in the right direction. You just don't know the functionality of how these things work." And he explained it to me in layman's terms, and I absorbed it immediately. And in that split second, it was just super transformative, because I understood, and these were things that I wasn't able to get in the classes, and I was bored to tears in those classes. I mean, already it was like, man, this is powdered wig music,
Dude, totally, man.
Yeah,
totally.
like,
I mean, this is so revelatory. I'm telling you, Eddie Henderson was practicing Killer Joe in the band. This is 64,
right.
And the security guard, who was a man of color, walked in. He goes, you better stop playing that devil's music. I'm going to put a bullet in your head. I mean, it was like, that was 64. And, I was born the year you started at Howard, and it was still powdered wig music. I mean, so many things going through my head. I mean, so essentially, though, you would say that you guys, like, was there, I mean, at that point, there was still, like Stanley Clark and George Duke. I'm just curious about, like, when.
Yeah, we were each other's stepping stone, and this is in the middle of the fusion period. So that was the dominant sound back then, electric jazz and that kind of thing, and groove bass and synthesizers and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, as a saxophone player, that's not it's not effective for me to study that kind of music, because the only group that featured a saxophone was really Weather Report with Wayne Shorter.
Very true.
Maybe Joe Farrell a little bit, with Return to Forever, but it was mostly electric music. So the foundational elements that I knew that I required, that's what I pursued. I was in rabid pursuit of the installations that would take me to wherever I could go or wherever I needed to go, and would give me the access to play whatever I wanted to play and whatever I could hear. So again, we were each other's stepping stone. I mean, we were each other's support system, coaches, and I have to tell you, man, I haven't had a growth spurt like that in terms of my my academics, my music academics, ever.
Wow.
So
That is unreal.
Just like a giant leap forward. And so then I was able to get in these, groups and ensembles and sit in, and I could hang. Whereas, just a couple months before, I had to sit on the sidelines and look, with my mouth agape. I'm like, wow, man, what is it? That I could hear it, but I didn't know what it was. And so it took my peers to explain it to me. Because, again, the descriptions, that came from the classes was based upon, Western European principles and things like that. And it was largely choral music and counterpoint, a lot of Bach, a lot of, Beethoven, Chopin and things like that, which later I grew to appreciate. And I recognized that I would refer to that, afterwards. But at the time, as an 18-year-old hothead, it was just in one ear and out the other.
Oz, like Alan Toussaint, Earl Palmer, Charlie Neville, John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Cannonball, all those guys had one thing in common, and that was that they walked the bar before they started to play this language known as bebop, and that was probably I don't think they ever even I don't think Charlie Parker even ever used that word, but the point is it was a very sophisticated language, but they were coming from the earthy the salt of the earth, the blues. They were walking the bar playing a lot of R&B, and yes, you were playing, it's not nearly as complex as jazz, but you were playing blues and funk early on, and a lot of cats today, just seeing from my own vantage point, it's just, there's a lot of cats that come up learning the sophisticated bebop, a lot of facility, riffology, technique, and no feel. They don't have they don't have that blues, that intricacy of the blues. And I just wonder, even though you weren't a jazzer and it took you a minute, everybody was their own stepping stone at Howard, how much of the foundation of the blues actually helped you find your own individual sound when you really started to take off in the jazz world?
Again, everything was intuitive for me because my reading wasn't good. I had no theoretical knowledge. It was repetition and imitation and feel. Because again, I'm talking like the mid '70s, 1975. I was 15 years old playing in these large ensembles, and all the groups were like 12 or 13 people. They had full horn sections with 4 horns, sometimes 2 drummers, 2 guitarists,
Wow.
3 lady singers, 1 male singer, congas. I mean, it was like a whole review, so you had to like find your footing inside, this arc and blend, and you had to make the audience dance. And whenever you took a solo, they had to groove and they had to feel it. And so there were a lot of effects and a lot of devices and things that we used that were akin to walking the bar. We didn't walk the bar per se, but when you stepped out there, you had to be funky, So, and also in high school, I played in marching bands, and also I played with some rock groups too, and they were like super loud. So I had a really good apprenticeship, playing in, feel good type groups. I played, with organ trios, bluesy bands, like real blues. I'm talking about Overalls and Hound Dog and Rocking Chair.
Can you name drop some of these old school blues cats you played with in St. Louis? I mean, that to me is where the rubber meets the road.
Oh, I played with Terry Williams and the Sound Merchants.
Oh my God, that's
yeah. I played with a group called the Unique Experience. I played with a group called Sounds of St. Louis. These are like bluesy type, dance, groups. And we played for these large organizations, the Elks and the Masons and, different types of fraternities where one song might last 45 minutes.
Yes.
And if
that's
you
my
kind
of. I mean, that's what I like. I mean, because nothing ever sounds the same either. It just keeps going on. It just grooves.
Exactly. We played the extended remix before that was a thing. And when you took a solo, I mean, your lips would be falling off and quivering because, they wanted you to really, nail it and scream and emote. So I learned those things before I learned, the real, technical aspects, the legitimate aspects of the music, So I think it's great because even now, as you said, I can hear in the playing of some young people, and I don't want to come off like, like a boomer, bashing, but I can tell, I can say, wow, their time is really weird. I can tell that they didn't play in a marching band, or they'd never played with like a really, rocked up blues band, and they've never played like a real funky, like, sweaty club, with no AC and
exactly.
wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder. People are dancing and people, just like, all night long with a disco ball, rotating, that kind of thing that puts a little, as they say, puts a little stank on your thing. Now,
I want you to just explain though, like you can hear that because their inner time feel is more linear. It's quantized. It's not as round. How can you tell that they have pretty much been? Because jazz has gotten so classicalized because of the fact that it's become this academy, thing. And I just, like, what can you hear in their time feel that you can tell that they don't have any stank on them?
I can hear that they've been institutionalized. I can hear that
institutionalized. Oh yeah, yeah.
I can hear that they kind of cut their teeth in classes, as opposed, to being under the watchful eyes and ears of elders who would, admonish them, if they misstepped, or prod them, and push them in the right directions, give them some constructive criticism. So I can tell that. You can hear, because everything is super technical. It's like 1,000 notes per minute. Right. It's a lot of flash. It's a lot of it's a lot of showmanship, but it's not like, not a lot of laying back. It's not like a lot of storytelling. You listen to somebody like Ben Webster.
Oh yeah.
Don Byas or Dexter Gordon play a ballad or whatever. You can hear their whole life within the first few bars. Whereas somebody younger, they would think that they have to prove themselves. Because that's what happens in schools. Because the competitive energy in schools is like, I play faster than you, I play more than you, I play higher, I play louder than you, I'm better than you. So, and I get better grades than you. So that puts another lean on the priorities. Whereas, for me, I was always screamed at, hey, slow down, take your time, and not only the old men that I played with on the bandstand, but the people in the audience. They say, yeah, tell your story, baby. Yeah, play it now. It's almost like church.
I dig.
Yeah.
It's a sanctified. No, I mean, so, if your advice, it's so easy to sit, we can sit here and riff on it, but if you had advice for kids, younger cats today, what would it be? Would it be because you get on these tracks and then there's no, I mean, with you, and we'll get into it later. I mean, you kind of, even though you guys were stepping stones for each other, you had this huge growth spurt, and there were still legitimate opportunities in the early 80s to be a professional musician. There were gigs, there was a studio scene. You went to New York, and now you have cats, they go to the academy. There's really no guarantee of any real opportunities coming out of it, so there's this pressure and competition. And I just wonder, for cats that really sit there and say, God, man, I have a story to tell, but there's all this noise and drama and competition. What would you recommend that they do in order to let that noise fall away and ultimately try to find their own sound and tell at least a little bit of their story?
I mean, I hate to be, the anti
it's all right.
Conservatory.
No, I know. I mean, I'm with you.
Right now. But I would tell a young kid, I would say, don't go to music school, because first of all, the tuition for these schools is exorbitant. And so, and if you're not on a full scholarship, so you take student loans and stuff, you may come out, you may be $200,000,
exactly,
$200,000 in the hole, with student loans that you'll be paying forever. Because when you come out, there's no guarantee you'll get a gig. So you might get some door gigs, or some playing on the street or whatever. You'll have to supplement your income, doing something that has nothing to do with music at all. And so there are no guarantees. I would say find a host of established players who are willing to meet you one-on-one. If you're a young saxophone player, I would say meet with some older saxophone players. Meet with some pianists and guitarists, so you learn harmony and theory, and and get with some trumpet players and people who play other instruments, trombone and vibraphone, so you can learn how to write for these instruments. Because a lot of times people, they write stuff that can't be played on a certain instrument because they have no experience with that instrument.
Very good point.
So yeah, I would tell them to learn how to cook. So you're
I
not eating
love
the
no,
rest
and
of
also
it.
like this is the other conundrum, man, is that
Yeah.
the cats. I mean, again, it's fine. I mean, it is to me. It's a major. It's the elephant in the room. Is the conservatory? You have professors now who are teaching kids who have no experience on the bandstand, none.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that to me is like that is just the beginning. That to me just is just sort of like my eyes want to roll into the back of my head, and I don't even know how we got to this point. I just feel like when I did that intro with you. I mean, you were born in '60, and like you said, there was still the curriculum was still in its infancy. I also just wonder, like, towards the tail end of did you have a chance to actually do any road dogging while you were at Howard?
No, not until I got to New York. But then, I never looked back because I would go to New York like every other weekend and sit in at the clubs, and so I was such a regular that people thought I lived in New York already, which is part of my master plan. I didn't want
Do you take the train up there?
Yes, I didn't want there to be any kind of gray area. It's like this guy just showed up and now I see him all the time. And so when I actually officially moved there, I'd gotten enough together, that people started to seek me out. Because I recognized that if I played, like Charlie Parker and Sonny Stead and Cannonball, which was what I was into, I wouldn't get any double takes. So I had to refine my playing and my concept and my approach to personalize it to the degree that people would call me specifically for what I offered, as opposed to being just a journeyman musician.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, so you were still at Howard and going up on every other weekend to play, or something along those lines.
Well, I went to Howard for 2 years, and I got a scholarship to go to school in Boston, and so I was up there for a couple of years, and that's where I was taking the bus.
I love it, dude. I was at Boston University. I was taking that bus to New York all the time.
Yeah.
So you were up there during sort of the Rock-A-Lam, Pat Metheny years, like more like 80?
It was like 80. I got up there at 8 and 80.
In 80.
And so we had jam sessions. I mean, marathon jam sessions. We were really knuckling down because now this is the last hurrah. It's like one final step, to reality. Because I didn't want to be like a leftover guy, who's been in Boston for 20 years after you graduated and never really ascended to, what you aspired to in the beginning. The things that made you get into the music in the
I
first
totally
place.
dig, man. No, so you're going to like Pooh's Pub and stuff? Like, where were you going to play?
Pooh's Pub was still happening. Michael's was happening. Michael's.
Sure.
There was a club called Wally's, which I had the gig, for a couple of years.
You had a gig. You had a steady gig at Wally's was still rocking when I was at BU around the turn of the century. That's pretty heavy.
And it's still going, but I mean, back then it was like really
cooking.
Because now it's kind of become like a funk club, and maybe they might have one or two nights of jazz. It's not. And
there was still like you would say that there was really still a relatively vibrant touring circuit. They were bringing in big acts. I mean, it wasn't in 1980. There was still a touring circuit for jazz.
Yes, I mean, because a lot of the giants were still alive,
right.
And they were actively scouting for young talent. Absolutely. And that's the thing, man. That's how I got to New York. Dizzy Gillespie was playing at the Performance Center up there, and I snuck downstairs and I asked him, I said, Mr. Gillespie, I don't want to disturb you, but it would just make my day if I could play one chorus of one tune with you. I mean, you can say no, and I totally understand. He said, oh yeah, my music, and so I played it, a little bit. And he said, okay, so yeah, 1980. I said, of course I know that. So he let me come out. All my friends was like screaming, yo, I came out.
Wow.
And so after one chorus, I bowed at him, respectfully. And he grabbed my sweater and pulled me back and ushered me to the mic and made me play a few more choruses. And then he let me play, the rest of the set.
That just made my day. That's the greatest. To me, there was no verbal. I mean, there was nothing verbally exchanged. He just was basically saying, come on, man, you belong. Stay.
Exactly. I mean, because, he liked the way I interpreted things. So that was a Friday. And then the following Monday, I got a call to my apartment. I guess his management called the administration at the school, and they gave him my personal number. Called me and said, Mr. Gillespie was like very impressed. You dressed nice. You respectful. You knew the language. You didn't step your boundaries.
Sure.
You told a really good story. You were succinct. And so he's going to be going on a 6-week tour to Europe, in a few weeks, and he would like to introduce you to the world stage. And I was like, wow, I'm really flattered and honored, but I'm due to be graduating, in a couple months, and it's just a really bad time, So I said, but let me mull over it, and I'll call you right back. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I said, man, you must be out of your mind. I called him right back, and I was freaking out because I had a rotary phone. It wasn't touch tone, so it took a long time for for me to dial that number.
Right.
And so, I left school, before graduating. I just, and then I did that, and I moved to New York. I moved in with Jeff Tane Watts, who was a classmate of mine. He had moved to New York, sometime earlier to play, with the Wynton Marsalis group. And Branford, was also a classmate. A whole lot of people were my classmates at the time. And it was
it was also like, I know guys. I've interviewed a ton of cats that graduated Berkeley in the a decade before you, but they left school. It was totally cool because there was tons of gigs. It was not like this suicide pact to not graduate. And then by 80, you were a little bit nerve-wracked, but couldn't pass up the opportunity. Now, that's another thing about the academy. I feel like the pressure to graduate or get good grades and completion that's the incentive. And so,
it offers no guarantee, really.
And I just don't know how many, what it is? To me, the fact that a lot of these guys who just got the memo. Dizzy's at the top. They were talent. Blakey was the same way. They were always looking for the younger cats. Would that even happen in the academy today, where you'd have essentially, a graybeard like Wayne or Herbie, being calling somebody like you at 20-something years old, saying, "Hey, why don't you come on? I want to show you the world." Does that even really exist anymore?
No, I'm one of those guys. I
bet you are. No, of course.
I'm in that realm. People, inundate me on a daily basis with emails and texts and social media, requests, to audition. They're sending me recordings. They're sending me links, to the performing online. And so, just as those elders, they really availed to me, an opportunity, a stage, a format, a forum, of expression. Like I said, I played with Dizzy for a while, and then soon after, it was McCoy Tyner, Woody Shaw, Freddie Hubbard, Muhal Richard Abrams.
I'm sorry, you just listed all my favorite people. It's just like this. So I want to go back to something you said earlier. You said when you got to New York, you wanted to be hired for what you did. You didn't want to be a journeyman. Right. But what I want you to explain in sort of drill down, and what was it that people were hiring you to bring to the bandstand?
Well, understand that there are many competent musicians who can play whatever they're presented with. They can read it, they can interpret it well, but it's almost like eating fast food. You feel full, but you don't feel satisfied. It wasn't a great experience.
Exactly, I dig, man.
And you don't have any memory. You don't have any memory of what you ate, And this is no slight, but it's like, okay, you have like, thousands and thousands of saxophone players who can play the keys off the instrument, but after it's over, does anything still resonate? Is there any remembrance of anything that stood out?
How did it make you feel? Exactly. How did it make you feel?
Yeah, and I recognize that, that's what I was headed towards, unless I did, some very careful and honest introspection and analysis of what I was doing, to find, the particulars in my approach, in my ideas that would be standout characteristics that would make people remember me. And so, you have to listen to recordings of yourself and say, oh, wow, I do that a lot, or there's a tick or something, so I can't get rid of it because I've been doing it since the very beginning. So I may as well maximize it and shine it to a blinding hue. And then that'll be one of my calling cards, and these are the things that, these are the reasons why we remember the greats and stuff, because they had a thing that made you recognize them in a very short amount of time. Like in 2 or 3 bars, you know exactly who Johnny Hodges is. In one strike of the piano, you know exactly who Thelonious Monk is. Mm-hmm. Duke Ellington's songs sound like him. Bud Powell's songs sound exactly like him. Wayne Shorter, and so they had these identifiers. And so I had to figure out what mine were, and if I didn't have any, I had to create some. And that takes a while, because the method for that is sometimes you have to you kind of have to shirk a lot of the things that you do and deliberately, and it's very difficult to wean those out of your plan, because they're kind of I don't know, you leaned on them. They're crutches. And so I had, to listen to my recording and say, man, I got to stop doing that. I got to stop playing that, because that's going to put me in that category of normalcy.
Dude, I want you to go deeper on this. You said the method to develop unique IDs is to get rid of the habitual stuff.
Right.
Can you give an example of something you were doing? Ultimately, well, it sounds to me like it almost is unconscious or subconscious evolution. I'm not even sure, because I think if you're too mental about it, I'm not sure if you're ever going to get out of your own way.
Well, I think it's very deliberate. Because these are particulars that, that are commonly known as jazz cliches. Right. We have the cliches in journalism. We have cliches in every strata of society that people do that, will offer a competent job. You say, wow, you did a really good job, but to do a stellar job, you have to, one up that, with something that you craft, that you hone. We don't talk about Coltrane, all these years after his passing for nothing. This cat, was steadfast, in his development. Thelonious Monk didn't just wake up one morning and had a sandwich and emerge, now I'm Thelonious Monk.
Freddie too. Those guys, man, they kept growing and growing and growing.
Yes, and it was very, very deliberate. It's almost like a, they have the raw materials. It's like Ronan has like a big block of granite or whatever, and then several months later he has this fantastic sculpture, but he can see from the raw materials, he can see the finished product.
I dig.
So he has to refine that. And that's what master players do. They don't just wake up and take a pill and become killing, overnight. It's like, it's a methodical process, and you have to have a vision, and you have to have foresight, and you have to deliberately go after the materials. You have to research, and like I said, there's a lot of things that you have to dispense with also. It's not just, the accumulation of things. You have to find out some things. This is superfluous. I have to trim the fat here, because, this isn't doing me any good. This is putting me in that normal category again. So sometimes you have to, you have to lighten the load.
So just take us through, this is important, because it's deliberate, and clearly you're on playback when you go through the postmortems of a show. You're listening to, I got to stop doing that. But then the ultimate part is when you're just kind of letting the body dance and not even thinking during your solos. So, early on in this sort of unique ID process, were you catching yourself in a live setting doing the habitual stuff and then sort of correcting on that? Or how does that work where you finally get to a point where you're like, I'm not going to ever be that journeyman anytime?
Well, again, I used to record everything I did, every practice session, every jam session, every gig. So I could analyze and decrypt, myself, my own plan. I didn't need anybody to tell me what was happening or what wasn't. I was my own best and worst critic, and it wasn't deconstructive. I was on a mission. And so,
dude, I want to be with you in 1981, walking the streets. You must have been tour de force, man.
Oh yeah, Sony Walkmans had just been invented, and so I would record everything that I could, that I was presented with, and I would take it and transcribe it and analyze it and figure out how to incorporate that into my playing, or how to to up my composition to create like a foundation and a framework for myself as a composer and an improviser. But 3 years of that, it gets to the point where you don't think about it anymore, because now you've refined your vocabulary to the degree that everything that comes out is resultant of all of these trials.
Mm-hmm.
And so you reach what I call it the zero zone. And the zero zone is I got it from Zen and Bushido and swordsmanship and a lot of samurai mythology.
Wow.
Where they learn all of these parries and strikes and blocks and everything, and then whenever they have to have a duel and stuff, they approach it with what's called no mind. They empty their mind. So what happens is you vastly unlearn everything that you've learned, so that you're innocent and you don't come into any situation with a prescript, or any kind of, it's like, you're like a child.
That's, I get it, dude. I love where this is to C.G. Munoz, who's one of my teachers. That's what he did with Paul Schaefer when he got Paul back into playing music in Toronto. He said they shedded everything, and then he said, now we're going to forget everything and just play one. And that to me is, so the zero mind. Zero
zone.
So from
it's called no mind. No mind.
No mind. That's it. No mind. I mean, that's when did you? I mean, maybe you can't put a year on it, but when you. Well, first of all, were you self-critical enough to realize that you were doing habitual stuff, or did you have to have your coat pulled by all these shamans, like, to say, hey, man, you keep playing the same thing? Like, were you already aware of it? And the subset to that is, how many years did it take where it just became second, where after a while there was no more thinking, you were in the, zero zone?
Nobody, pull my coat and say anything, because playing normal bebop or whatever, a normal jazz approach is so common that it's largely accepted.
Right, it's like the fast food analogy kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like wow, man, you really playing, because they play just like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you play just like me. Yeah, you're great. So it's only when you step out, and play.
Man. This is heavy, man.
Yeah, you play some devices that are a bit, unorthodox or strange, and they don't know, what the origin of it is, or what you're referring to. That's when you get, like the side eyes. Man, where is this cat coming from? Where did you get that? And, it's like it sounds like some crazy.
I love it.
Thermonuclear, devices. Like, man,
melting away. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah.
Until you do it to the degree where it's smooth and it connects and it flows. And now they say, oh man, you have your own style, your own concept.
Dude, I've been waiting to talk to Greg Osby for a long time. This is how hard that is. Monumental. I mean, you would say that challenge is more on most people. Most people don't get there. You would say that challenge is more mental than physical?
Yeah, it is more mental. And physical too, because we have muscle memory and we kind of like resign ourselves to things that are comfortable and acceptable or whatever. So people, oh man, it's just competent. But see, the thing is, I mean, I didn't really arrive at that point until after I started collaborating with a lot of hip hop artists, to be honest with you.
Interesting. Talk about that.
Yeah, because a lot of them, I mean, they're, instinctive. They don't have any training at all. So everything is about feel and vibe and, and how banging it is and stuff. So, working with a lot of hip hop artists, I used to, fancy, how a lot of rappers and stuff, how they would come up with rhymes and stuff. It was clever. It was rhythmic. It flowed. It bounced. It was almost like a solo. A lot of them, especially, the nuance of the breath control and just the articulation and things. And I was like, wow, man, if I could emulate that on the saxophone, I'd be in a whole completely different category. Wow. And plus, the rhythm is so strong that you have to be solid.
Absolutely.
And so I would say, it might have been like the early 90s. I was in my early 30s, when I really felt liberated to the degree, wow, I think I'm on solid ground now. Because before then, my ideas were ahead of my technique. It was like I was trying things that I hadn't really solidified in terms of, just working it out fully. So I would present it to the public or on recording stuff prematurely, and I can listen to those recordings now. And I can say, wow, I can hear what I was trying to do.
Absolutely, I do.
But it wasn't quite there,
Can you just drop a couple? I mean, because hip hop was thriving in the early '90s. I mean, who were some of the cats that you? And there was just so many unsung cats, and actually, there was still a lot of human rhythm going on. It wasn't all machine. So what kind of groups, hip hop groups, were catalysts? I think the breathing and the storytelling, and then ultimately feel and vibe are huge. So who were some of the groups that you really maybe even collaborated with?
My favorites, were Tribe Called Quest, of course Public Enemy, because Chuck D, just amazing and is amazing.
Insane.
I like Pete Rock and CL Smooth. I mean, Pete Rock's beats, we just had a bounce. And CL Smooth, he just sounded like, for lack of a better term, like super jazzy. I like Gangstar, Guru. He had like a real laid back feel. And Premier, his beats, were banging. Large Professor, would do a main source, and then later on, of course, Jay Dilla and all that kind of stuff. So I like more bouncy kind of guys, and also like a Biggie Smalls too. He had like a really really nice flow. But there's some West Coast cats that I like too. I mean, it's I was really a big fan, and I collaborated with a lot of hip hop artists too. I would like do contracting. I would contract bands to replicate the samples that they would use on their records, because the owners of those records or their handlers wanted crazy money for like snippets of sampling. So they called me, and I would go into the studio, take the musicians, and then we would replicate those samples. So that was fun, and it was lucrative, and it was a great straddling of the fence. I was able to see what they did up close.
You have, to put a cap on this, essentially, it sounds like over a decade of being on your journey until you felt like you were on solid ground. I just want to give some perspective for cats who are searching, right, who are definitely in the boat that you were in the mid to late 80s, where you were intellectually ahead of your muscle memory, so to speak. Right. And that, so it's probably like a 12 to 15 kind of year journey in order to find that point where you're rid of your habitual. It's almost like yoga in some ways. It's really quite, you get rid of all the habitual thoughts, and then you're a clear vessel for information coming through you.
Well, some people attain, a level of, just mastery technically early.
That's right.
I mean, there's a lot more resources available to young people now.
Right. That's happening today. It's riffology, but it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, because I mean, they're not apprenticing. They're not hanging out with the older cats. I mean, if you avoid older cats thinking that I don't need them, or everybody tells me I'm great, so I must be great already. I got a record deal. I got I got the nice girlfriends and stuff. So I don't need them. And so it's going to be the blind leading the blind. You're going to have groups of young cats, stepping over each other's feet, because stepping on each other's feet, because they don't know the difference. They don't know the difference. I mean, and even when they do hear older players, it just sounds dated to them. So they're dismissive of it and they reject it. And so that's why the music, has very few grounding elements. It doesn't have like the same stability as somebody who came up in big bands and blues and organ groups and, marching bands and reggae and play with a lot of Latin bands, calypso and soca and salsa and all that stuff. These things are bricks in the wall, and they help you build a solid foundation. But if you're dismissive of any or all of it, but then you're gonna arrest your own development or stifle it, to a point where you're blind and you don't realize that you're your own worst enemy. So I would just implore with all young cats, and not even just young cats, to seek out information from wherever you can get it. I mean, it can be within your peer group, it can be from elders, it can be from professors, it can be from people who don't even play. You know, I've got some magnificent ideas from people who aren't really musicians, but
Wow.
you know, their eyes are a lot, you know, more they see things a lot more clearly because they're not encumbered by technical jargon.
Or they just hear things different. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. You know, I mean, I have fans that have incredible record collections. I mean, that would just put most musicians to shame, and they're very detailed. You know, in
I dig it. Yeah.
the sessions and the discography and who did what and the history and so I mean, it's out there. It's out there. But all that to say is that I think that we are standing on the threshold of another renaissance in music, another giant leap forward.
I want you to break. The floor is yours. You explain, because here's the thing. Excuse me. Going back to this unique ID thing, ultimately you find your individual sound, and like even with, I could put on Moon Train and Keep Your Soul, Woody Shaw and Keep Your Soul Together, Freddie Hubbard, and you can tell the difference between those two guys in a heartbeat, just like you can tell the difference between Mickey Roker and Pete LaRocca. Everybody had their own individual sound. And now, and the reason I'm going to challenge you on this, cats that are coming out of the conservatory are sounding like their professors. There's a homogenization of sound. I can't tell who's who. So it's sort of what I'm skeptical about, because I want the Renaissance more than anything, is how do you have a Renaissance when nobody has really sound? I mean, there just is homogenization. I just don't hear any individual sound. And in fact, I'm not even sure if it's encouraged, because we seem to, as we can see in our socio-political context and everything else, everything is bending towards conformity and, in the worst case, autocracy. So to me, I don't want to get too macro, but explain the Renaissance.
Okay, well, first of all, I mean, to touch upon one point you just made, is that the reason there's this homogeny is that there are way more schools than there used to be.
That's right.
When I was a student, there was only a handful.
Right.
I mean, it might have been
it was North Texas, Berkeley,
Berkeley, New England Conservatory, right. Eastman.
Now every school has it. Yeah.
Every school has a music program and so-called jazz program and degrees. So at the end of every semester, they're graduating a whole bunch of people who descend upon, different metropoli, and in hopes of, changing the world, But what they don't recognize is there are a whole lot of people that sound just like them, that have studied from the same books, that have listened to the same people. And, man, I hate to be critical, but a lot of, these younger people, they listen to the same thing. They listen to the same cats.
That's right.
And they all sound the same. All the young alto players, they listen to, one alto player. All the young tenor players, they listen to maybe two. All the pianists listen to, one guy. All the guitarists, they listen to one guy. And so, you could interview any layman on the street and say, well, what do you think about jazz, for lack of a better term? And they say, I don't know. It all sounds the same. And they really wouldn't be lying, because it really does in many respects. I mean, every once in a while, you'll find that, a standout, somebody who, has like, wow, man, they really have the goods, but it's like, looking for a needle in the haystack.
Well, I mean, like, let's just put it this way. When you came to New York in the early 80s, every cat that you were on the bandstand with that was leading the group had their own sound. And now it's like one or here and there, and that's a bright, shining light. I just want you to really more to look towards the light. I mean, you've been riffing so articulately. What gives you faith in this Renaissance? Okay,
well, history has shown us in vivid detail that after every economic crisis, a socio-political crisis, world, civil unrest or whatever, the arts in general, they take a giant leap forward, because during these periods, if it's depression, or recession or whatever, people, largely at home in their personal laboratories working out things, because they don't have any work. And so, so you have, the swing era, bebop, hard bop, this whole gospel jazz, the fire music of the turbulent 60s. You had Vietnam after that. You had the Korean War back in the late 50s or whatever.
Absolutely.
Then you have these Gulf Wars, and Desert Storm, and all this kind of stuff. So it changes, the axis and the rotation of the Earth, in terms of how people look at things and how they see themselves in it. Say, man, I better make a move now, or else people will forget about me, or I don't want to get left behind. So, in the past 2 years, most creatives have been dormant, at home, figuring out what they're going to do, and or losing their apartment and having to go back to their hometown and stay in their parents' basement, or whatever. So they've had plenty of time, to.
They have a story. They have stories to tell.
They have stories to tell if they know how to, to assemble, things, for valid presentations.
Right,
Some people have stories to tell, but they don't know how to put it together.
That's right.
It's like a word scramble. It's like, wow, man. It still sounds irresolute a lot of times because they haven't gone to people who know how to put it together, people who've been doing it for many years. I'm a big fan of apprenticeship.
You've been. I just. Let me just. I love where you're going with this. When I interviewed Phil Ranlin, the great trombone player, he. In the late 60s, obviously, you talk about the riots, the burn, Martin Luther King got assassinated, and all these cities burned, Detroit being one of them. And this is the only thing that I sort of am skeptical about and I want you to, I genuinely don't know. See, what happened was after Detroit burned down, what did the federal government do? They put grants and flooded those major urban centers with money for the arts, and it built up these huge. The McKinney brothers were there. They had these bands. The government recognized the arts were an essential part, not just of the communities, but it also gave people livelihoods. And today, just the fact that we connected through Frankie Lacrasto, the piano player, a lot of these younger cats. I mean, it's like, oh, you can pay to play, or you can play for the door. And so I ask Oz. Okay, I get that creatives have been quote unquote dormant and working on their own thing, which is great. But does our society, culture at the uppermost levels of government, where the arts have always been funded by, there's been a lot of philanthropy. Do you believe that our society still sees a musician as a viable profession, or is music a musician's gift to the world?
That's that's the $10,000 question because
because that's the thing. That's the Renaissance can only occur. There has to be gigs. There has to be certain. Go ahead.
Well, and I talk to a lot of my students. I'm like, man, listen, don't devalue yourself. Don't devalue the art form by paying somebody, to play in their club, and then you'll do like a 60-40 split, after you reach like a certain threshold. I mean, you didn't like toil, for years, to get your degree and sacrifice so much of your life just so somebody can exploit you.
That's
like
right.
That, or if you're going to play on the street, play somewhere where nobody knows you, go somewhere where nobody knows you at all. And don't look like a pauper. Don't look like a minstrel or whatever, look dignified. Don't be out there, with like dirty sneakers and, disheveled or whatever. Look like, yeah, I'm playing for money. This is my solo gig. I'm out here, but whatever. But I don't need to be out here, And I stay on them, man. I ride their cases. I'm like, listen, man, you're gonna have to like really work on something that's gonna make people, see value, in your presentation. Not, it's just okay. Another one bites the dust. It's like, wow, man, I never heard that before. Well, I never heard it like that before. I never heard it in that way before. I mean, cats are going to really have to, lock horns and sequester themselves, with other like minds, people. And so this gets, to the collaborative spirit, that's missing. Because, right now, we're in this me era.
Exactly. Well, that's what you were talking about before. The idea in school is like, instead of putting together a group and having conversation melodically, it's like, I can play faster than you. I have better chops than you. It's all me. It's all individualized.
Yeah. Everybody's, but I mean, this music was largely born of a collaborative spirit,
exactly.
Where people had collectives, or they would have meeting places, like workshops or after hours jam sessions where people could hear in living color, live and up front, what somebody else was working on. You could like take that and you could file it away, and or you could use it, or you could play a variation of it and come back the next night with something that might be an augmentation of it. It might even be a better example or a better version of it. So but when people start to believe the hype, believe their own hype, believe their reviews, and believe the pats on the back. Oh man, you're really great. You sound great. Yeah, okay, he's great for like a 20-year-old, but a 20-year-old playing a ballad, or like trying to evoke some deep emotion out of a ballad, a love song, sounds different than somebody who's maybe in their 30s or 40s or whatever. Because I mean, how many girlfriends has he had?
I did. No, I totally did.
How many breakups have you had? I mean, so you're gonna play. You don't know what love is until you know the meaning of the blues.
Wow.
How much blues have you encountered, like living in your parents' basement playing PlayStation?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because maybe in some ways you are feeling the blues. You've been humbled by the fact that you never thought you'd be back in your parents' basement, but now you are. So there is kind of a humbling experience. But what I'm hearing from you is like. I forget the word, the apprenticeship is key. And then instead of having like what we would call like a word salad, person being able to actually articulate a story like that, those are things that are major in terms of people's, how many of I feel like your generation is such an important mix here because I mean, I had a couple of audio clips we're going to have to do set 2 because I mean, guys like Kenny Burrell, they're still with us, but how much they've already given their life to the music. How many of your peers do you see in the same kind of mindset where they're trying to, in their own way? I mean, there's nobody being able to go on a 6-week. In some cases, I guess there is, but the Dizzy analogous thing that happened to you. I don't know how relevant that is today, but how many of your peers are doing what got the memo and are doing what you're doing to try to give the next generation an opportunity to find their voice?
That's a handful. I mean, again, the majority of the work is abroad. In the United States is vastly difficult to tour.
It's always been that way too.
Unless you have funding and support system and foundation and handlers, management. If they see you as a viable source of income, and a young upstart, a young hotshot or whatever. We have a few, and some of them are my former students, but. I tell them they have to be careful too, because you don't want to wear out your welcome, and people see you so much that after a few years you burned yourself out.
That's right.
People don't want to hear you anymore. You have to temper your appearances, and choose wisely. But the thing is there are a handful of people, in my peer group, they like I do, they go scouting. To the universities, like every university that I do master classes and lectures and residencies at, I encounter people that have a great deal of potential. I say they sound really good for a student, but they're going to be amazing in a few years once they get out into the real world, living on their own, and they have to step up, as a citizen of the world, and they're not insulated in the bubble of academia, where where your next meal is coming from. You live in the dorm, all this kind of. You have an allowance. Yeah. Now I have to play.
You got to sing for yourself.
And I have to make myself attractive to people so that they will hire me, and not just hire me, but hire me to for something special. I'll leave my mark. And then people will hear that, and then there'll be a domino effect. People say, "Man, who is that guy?" As opposed to, he sounds great, but he's yet another clone or whatever. That's the term that's thrown around, for people that come out of the institutions. They say it's like an assembly line kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oz, can we do set 2? I forget what date you said you're going to be in the clear after the 28th. I mean, I just got so much more to get to. We just burned through an hour, though.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem. So we can establish a date.
Yeah, we'll get it going. It's such an honor to connect with you, man, and I am so glad that you are doing your part, man. Like, to me, the only thing that I think, medical doctors and medical professionals have been amazing during this time, but I actually look at musicians like the ones we've been talking about for the last 60 minutes as healers, and I just feel like it's the most important thing, not just for our country, but the world, and I pray that it's like you said, after these, sort of incredibly turbulent experiences, that, there will be in some way a renaissance, but no matter what, your work, you're being looked down on, and your work will live on long after you've transcended. So many blessings to you, man. We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
All right,
okay,
dude.
We'll be in touch.
All right,
Thanks.
bub. Later.
All right.
Bye. And we'll be back with Alice Stewart right after this.